Welcome back, everyone, to WeHeartTherapy. You're watching EFT Talk, and I'm your host, Anabelle Bugatti, licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as EFT, certified EFT therapist here in Las Vegas, Nevada. And today we have a very exciting guest. Some of you may recognize her from some previous videos and from trainings in emotionally focused therapy. We have Dr. Zoya Simakhodskaya. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified EFT supervisor and trainer in New York City. And she has agreed to talk to us today about the true difference between withdrawers and pursuers. Thank you so much, Zoya, for being a part of our program.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. It's so good to be with you again, even if at a distance.
Excellent. Thank goodness for technology these days.
Exactly. What did we do before, right?
Yeah. So let's talk to everyone a little bit about pursuers and withdrawers, because I know that there are some clear-cut differences that everyone can sort of recognize, but then there's some times where it's maybe not so obvious and we can get easily confused. And so sometimes those differences between pursuers and withdrawers can get blurred a little, especially maybe when you see a extroverted withdrawer. And some people may think, oh, that's really a pursuer. So can you help us understand a little bit more about the differences?
Sure. I guess what I want to back up a bit and remind us, why do we want to know? Why is it even important, right? What is our goal in this? And I think we're trying to get a sense of these interactional patterns, right? And we're mostly trying to understand what drives, right? What drives the shutting down or pulling away? What drives the pursuit and the anger or demand or criticism, right? What's underneath that? What are the primary emotion, attachment-related emotions that actually drive those behaviors? That is more important than deciding whether someone is a pursuer or someone is a withdrawer, right? It helps us make sense and put the positions on the cycle and have our little map that we like. But the real reason we're tracking and trying to understand is because we are trying to access the underlying emotions and attachment, fears and needs, to help people express them and be more vulnerable and own their experience and do something different, right? So if we keep that in mind, we can explore, right, what we're paying attention to, who is protesting or pursuing for connection, right? We're beginning to hear in the demand or in the anger, in the criticism, there is an intention, the motivation of, I'm trying to get through. I'm trying to feel connected again, or I'm protesting against the disconnect, right? I don't want to be abandoned. That's sort of the typical pursuer, right? And for the typical withdrawer, it's about the sense of safety, right? I want things to be safe. I want to protect myself. I want to protect the relationship. I want things to calm down and be calm, because in the calmness, in the safety is when I can connect. Right? It's not like withdrawers don't want to connect. We have to remember that, right? So that's our classic, typical pursuer and withdrawer, right? And then we, as you mentioned, we can get a partner who is funny and extroverted, and they talk a lot, and they're very expressive, right? And yet we often don't quite get a sense of what is it they're upset about, right? They can give us, like, sometimes talk about the people who are very smart. I mean, here we're in New York, we got, I joke that I'll take a fireman or carpenter anytime over a lawyer or a psychologist is one, because they can be very educated and intellectual, and yet they can be cognitive. That's right, and they can use that again in the pursuit of defending themselves or feeling safe.
Right. As part of their withdrawal mechanism. And I
That's
love
right.
how you say that, because I've often had a lot of withdrawers come in and they do this, we always got to be positive, and they want to shut down the negative, and they'll tell their partner, you're always looking at the negative, let's just be positive. And for them, it's like, we got to keep it positive just so we can keep the peace and everyone's happy, and there's, but
Exactly.
you find underneath they're really just avoiding their true emotions.
Right, that's what we're actually interested in. Why it's so important to keep things positive and peaceful. Because when it's not, what's the danger, right? Our relationship is in trouble. Or I'm going to feel I screwed up again in her eyes over and over. She sees me as the bad guy. Right? And it's not fair, or it feels really bad that I keep failing. So I'm going to try to keep the peace and say, let's not talk about it. It's going to be, let's look at the bright side, right? What's the intention? What's the motivation? Because as we get into the motivation, then we have more access to the feelings, right? What is it like to feel like you're always failing in your partner's eyes, right? That doesn't feel very good.
Right.
Then we have, so let's be fair and talk about some pursuers who get quiet and withdraw, right? So behaviorally they're withdrawing, but I often when I train, I say, you see the same behavior. They say, we both went to our separate rooms and that was the end of the fight. For me, that's not the end. Then I'm curious, so what happens for you when you're sitting there all alone in your room, right? I want to know what the experience is like. And oftentimes for the pursuers, you will hear, they're not happy sitting alone in the room. And part of them is hoping he'll come back or she'll come back and knock on the door. Right? So when I hear that, even in the first session, then I say to myself, right, so that's more of a pursuit. The intention is still, while I withdrew to stop the fight, but I'm still hurting and I still want to resolve it.
And sometimes I get the sense that protesters will withdraw as their form of protest to see if they can get the person, almost like a test. Will you come after me if I pull away? Exactly,
right? But once again, what's the intention of that? What were you hoping for, right? I'm more likely to ask, what are you hoping for? That he'll finally get the point and talk to me? Right, so you still want him to talk to you. Right. Then I think where people also get confused about defensive withdrawers.
Yes.
So when two people are fighting, the attack kind of cycle, you also need to look who is attacking because they want to get through. They want to be heard, they want to be understood, they want to get a response, and who is attacking to end the conversation.
Right, to get the other person to back off.
Exactly. If
I hurt you enough, you'll go away and leave me alone.
That's right. I'll give you an example. This is something that really stayed with me. This was many years ago. I was working with a couple, and challenging couple, both had histories of trauma. And I, in my perception, he was a very classic intellectual withdrawer who would always want to explain and kind of give reasons and calm things down. And she was very emotional pursuer who would get easily upset. She had lots of trauma. And then one day we're exploring an incident, and during the incident, during the fight, she locked herself in the bathroom. And they were sort of like screaming. She was inside, he was outside. And somewhere in the middle of that conversation, it suddenly hit me. And I said to him, wait a minute. So when she would scream at you from behind the door, you would feel that she is still trying to engage with you and you wanted to resolve the issue. And he said, yes. And I turned to her and said, but when you were screaming inside the door, you were hoping that he would stop coming after you. He would leave you alone. And my whole perception of the case in that moment shifted, because I finally was able to see how much of her screaming or her explosiveness was out of fear and wanting to shut down. But he would see it as, oh, it's not over yet. There's a chance I can talk.
Right.
Right. Let's see. The other situation where people get confused is, you said the extroverted withdrawers, and I was thinking shy pursuers, or soft pursuers who can be quite quiet or easily give up. And it can look like withdrawal, but at the same time, if we listen to the music of their unhappiness, there is a fear. There's like, I don't want to make things worse, but I'm still not happy. Right?
Yeah. So do you find that equally, or that it's possible that even pursuers might not always be really feeling their emotion, even though they may be more expressive in protesting, they're also not always feeling their emotions, which sometimes can make them look like a withdrawer, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. I think there might be some disagreements among trainers. You know, some might say when they're sitting with someone who has a lot of emotion and can express themselves, they're more likely to be a pursuer. But I don't know that it's always true. I think someone can be very expressive and yet have lots of difficulty accessing a more vulnerable emotions, right? So I think
be a withdrawer in that case.
It depends. I think we need to know what the motivation is, right? So we're looking at both the behavioral moves and the intentions and emotional moves. So, for example, let's stereotype a little bit, but I mean, I see gay couples and it can be the same, but let's say a man is pursuing for sex or for physical proximity. That does not make them a emotional pursuer, right? So we're still going to explore even that proximity is about, I want to be close to you, but I feel safe. This is how I know to feel safe. This is how I know when we're together. But what happens for me when I'm in distress, right? What happens when our relationship is in distress? Do I try to keep things kind of quiet and okay and placate, right? That's another way of withdrawing. I'm trying to make it better. I'm trying to bring you flowers. I'm trying to be a nice husband. But I don't actually talk to you about how upsetting it is to me when you're upset with me.
Right. So it sounds like what you're saying. So I sort of hear two important things, and help me if I've got this right. So it sounds like sometimes we get confused because we're interpreting maybe the difference between pursuer and withdrawer based on the behavioral responses, and we need to focus more on the intention, which will really inform which position they are. What's the driving motivation behind the behavior?
Right.
And the second is that when things are soft and peaceful, sometimes even withdrawers will, seem like they're pursuing, but we're really more after what happens when they're in distress. Is their inclination to move toward and resolve, or shut down and pull away and get safe?
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. That's right. And then we have couples who switch on you, right? Especially those with trauma histories, both kind of their own childhood traumas and maybe in this relationship. And you might be, sitting in the room and their cycle, and you're kind of doing your thing and tracking, and then something happens or the topic switches, and suddenly the one who is typically very expressive and talks about the fear of abandonment and loss of connection suddenly shuts down and says, I can't talk, and I'm fine, and I just want enough already. Right? And the other one is actually quite upset about the particular topic. We have to be prepared for that. And I think it sometimes can shake us up, and we get confused, and we try to say, no. Usually you don't do it this way. Usually you do this. And we try to get them back to our cycle.
Right.
But I think what's more important, you want to work with the emotion, the attachment-related emotion that's most alive in the room. And so if in that moment a client is feeling some kind of danger and risk and they're shutting down, I want to work with that. I want to understand what that danger is, right? So that's the traumatized clients. And then sometimes we have clients who don't have many traumas, and they might be healthier, or there's more secure, and which means flexibility. So they, on the topic of parenting, she's a withdrawer and he's a pursuer, but then on the topic of the, religion on in-laws, it switches. So there's kind of flexibility. I think the difference between those two sets is, as a therapist with traumatized couples, I feel more confused and disorganized. Things gonna happen very quickly.
So can you tell us some common markers of a withdrawer or a pursuer? And I've heard some, and one of the most common I've heard is that withdrawers are afraid of never being good enough. But I've had a lot of pursuers have that same feeling. So to me, I take that one with a grain of salt, because I've had a lot of pursuers feel like I'm never good enough, and that informs their protest, right? Because they want to be good, or on some level they feel like they're good enough. How come you don't agree that I'm good enough, right?
Right.
But what are some telltale signs that we have a pursuer or a withdrawer?
I'm finding myself being reluctant to answer that question.
Sure.
And I wonder why.
Because it's not always a one size fits all, right?
Right. That's number one. And number two, I really want EFT clinicians to be less interested in putting someone into that box, and more follow the emotion. So let's take the example you gave, pursuer who says, I don't feel good enough, right? Give me some more. Tell me again. play that person for a moment.
Okay, so like I'm the most, I'm your wife. I should be the most important person, but why, everything I do, like I never get credit for it. I just feel like nothing I ever do is good enough, and I don't understand why.
Right, nothing I ever do for you is good enough. I want to be good enough for you. I want to be good enough for you, so you want to spend time with me, so you would want to be close with me. Right? It's so frustrating. You're saying, how come you don't see me as good? Right? Yeah. So as I'm beginning to follow it, the sense I get, it's not really about I'm failing you and that feels really bad. I'm mad at you that you see me as bad.
Yes.
Right?
That's good. That's a big differentiation, because I have found more with withdrawers is that it does feel really bad to feel like I'm failing you versus I'm mad at you that you don't see me as good enough.
Exactly.
Even though the words on top, the superficial words that they use may sound the same, like I never feel good enough, the motivation is much different.
Exactly. You got it. Exactly.
So that sounds like really the big takeaway from this is not to get, and it is important to know, because as part of EFT, we have to know who we need to engage first and who we need to soften, so that's important. But it seems like, not getting so stuck with right off the bat studying the behavior and saying, okay, based on this behavior, this person must be the pursuer and this person must be the withdrawer. Right. Slowing it down and going deeper and looking underneath into the real motivations behind the behavior, which will really tell you if they're a pursuer or withdrawer.
Right. And again, what is the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is to access those attachment-related primary emotions and lead to sharing and vulnerability. That is our ultimate goal, right? I think the other situation where people get confused, they sometimes confuse the attachment styles or strategies of a particular person to positions in this relationship.
That's really important too. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. I like to give an example of a client, actually individual client I worked with. He was a young gay man. And he came in because his sister was very concerned that he's spending too much time doing social gaming. And literally he would work all night in IT and then spend the rest of his waking hours playing social games. But he wasn't sure if he had a problem. So we explored that. And at the time, he was in a relationship. And when he would describe the relationship, it was very clear that that person was pursuing him, and he was quite avoidant and withdrawing. And in general, as you can imagine, somebody who's spending a lot of time with technology and avoiding human interactions, we would say they have more avoidant attachment strategies. Well, he came back, we did a piece of work, and he came back a couple days later, and this time he was in a new relationship. But that person was even more avoidant than he was. And what he described, that in this relationship, he became a pursuer. Right? So for us, yes, we're paying attention when we do attachment history. What is the general stance when I'm in distress? What is my go-to coping strategy, right? Is it more on the avoidance spectrum or more on the anxious, ambivalent kind of spectrum? But what matters more is what happens in this relationship when there is a distressing moment, right? What is the dance between these two people? Even if the rest of his life he's more of a withdrawer and avoidant, but in this relationship his partner is withdrawing even more, and so he gets very anxious and begins to pursue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's a really good distinction. And I was just thinking of a client I have who in their cycle protests, but she very much withdraws very often. And it's not even like, and maybe sometimes I feel like it's like that I give up super easily, right? Like I'll protest, and if you don't go for it, then it's like, forget it. And then she shuts down and pulls away and just wants to be by herself. And sometimes that gets confusing. You're like, okay, are you pursuing? Are you withdrawing? But, you know, initially that brief initial instinct is, I'm going to protest to get connection with you. Because some protesters have a very short, you know, fuse between, I'm going to protest for your connection. If you don't give it to me, then I just, you know, shut down and pull away and feel safe, because that rejection, that abandonment is just too painful.
Exactly. I'm trying to protect myself from feeling even more pain. Because if I keep pursuing, then I would feel more disappointed, versus a different kind of pursuer that the sense of helplessness and giving up is too upset. It's too painful, too overwhelming. So they're being able to do something, right? To keep going, and it is energizing, and at least they feel like I'm doing something.
Right. I'm fighting for the relationship rather than just fighting to protect myself, to fend off danger.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's oftentimes what it might feel like, is one person is fighting for the relationship to not have it fall apart, while the other person more takes a stance of, I'm trying to fend off danger.
Right. I'm trying to fend off danger by keeping by keeping things safe.
Yes.
Right.
And calm and peaceful. Positive.
That's right. But my ultimate intention is, I don't want anybody to feel bad. I want us to be okay. Right? And I don't want to feel like a failure in your eyes.
Right. We don't want anyone to rock the boat.
It's scary when the boat is rocking. It's pretty scary, right? And because I've never had experience of anybody helping me with my fear, right? It doesn't occur to me that I can even notice and say, I am scared.
Right.
That is our job as EFT therapists, to say, wait a minute. Here you are working so hard to keep everybody safe, and yet inside, that doesn't feel very good, and nobody knows about that.
Right. That's really good. And it's hard to imagine letting your guard down and having your partner protect you.
Yeah. If nobody's ever done that for me, why would it even occur to me?
Exactly. Right. That's really good. I really love that. That's really good. Well, thank you so much, Zoya, for joining us today. Is there any last important pieces about this topic that you feel are important to mention before we wrap up?
I guess I would, again, R in risk, right, is about repeating. So I'm going to repeat again. It's less important what position the person has, and it's more important, as you're in the room and working with them, to explore the motivation, the intention, the attachment-related emotion. That is ultimate our goal, to be able to connect that to our behavioral strategies.
Right. And you may not be able to get a clear picture or accurate picture of the pursuer or withdrawer until you get to that point.
It's quite possible, right. And I would encourage, which happens anyway, as EFT therapists, notice what happens for you, right? How sometimes you might pursue and sometimes you might withdraw, and what might trigger that. So pay attention to that, and that would be a good learning.
Good self of the therapist, which can help you get into the shoes of the client.
Exactly.
Well, that's so wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We really appreciate your time. And
my pleasure.
Again, everybody, make sure that if you're in New York, you watch out for Zoya's trainings. She's also going to be at the EFT Summit in San Diego this year.
That's right.
And she runs trainings all across the country and the world, actually. So make sure that you look her up and attend some of her trainings. And again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure that you hit subscribe and keep on watching.